Welcome to another episode of Follow the Brand. I am your host, Grant McGaw, CEO of 5-Star BDM, a 5-star personal branding and business development company. I want to take you on a journey that takes another deep dive into the world of personal branding and business development using compelling personal story, business conversations, and tips to improve your personal brand. By listening to the Follow the Brand podcast series, you will be able to differentiate yourself from the competition and allow you to build trust with prospective clients and employers. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. Make it one that will set you apart, build trust, and reflect who you are. Developing your 5-star personal brand is a great way to demonstrate your skills and knowledge. If you have any questions for me or my guests, please email me at grant.mcgaugh, spelled M-C-G-A-U-G-H, at 5-star BDM, B for brand, D for development, M for masters.com. Now let's begin with our next 5-star episode on Follow the Brand. Welcome to the Follow Brand Podcast. I am your host, Grant McGaugh, CEO of 5-Star BDM, where we help you to build a 5-star brand that people will follow. Every 37 minutes of an hour, advertising in the world is done by WPP Company, according to my next guest, Douglas Freeman. From eCommerce business development to delivering DEI speeches in the United Nations, Douglas Freeman frames a unique story of his rise to prominence. Missed diversity opportunities led him to understand how to leverage diversity for valuable returns for cost saving, productivity gains, and revenue, specifically leveraging diversity to show business impact. Diversity best practice dialogues allowed him to work globally by focusing on impactful global frameworks. His job is to scale out the knowledge and shift the mindset about the diversity, inclusion, and equity success models. Douglas Freeman is the president of the Global Reflections and Inclusive Leadership Inclusion Practice at UniWorld Group, Incorporated, a global multicultural communication and advertising firm. UWG, at 51 years old, is the oldest multicultural DEI firm in the United States. Global Reflections is a sophisticated line of client offerings that provides corporations with a deep portfolio of holistic diversity and inclusion best practices customized to the client's specific business needs. Mr. Freeman and UWG have completed diversity and inclusion projects for some of the world's leading organizations, from Disney and Major League Baseball to Morgan Stanley and the European Union Commission in Brussels. Mr. Freeman has served as Vice Chairman of the United Nations Gender Equality Experts Panel and was named a 40 Under 40 business leader by the NYC Network Journal, and is a former board trustee of Georgetown College, which is U.S. educational partner of Regent's Park College, Oxford University. He recently served on the Dean's Alumni Leadership Council at the JFK School of Government, Harvard University. Mr. Freeman also holds a master's in public policy degree from the John F. Kennedy School at Harvard University and MBA Essentials credential from the London School of Economics, along with a Bachelor of Arts from the University of California at Berkeley. Mr. Freeman attended Harvard University on a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, completed his graduate degree focused on international trade and finance, and received the top grade A for his master's thesis work. He is a two-time British Columbia Under-19 Rugby All-Star. He is a two-time Canadian Universities All-Canadian and was selected for the Canada Under-21 team as a Rugby All-Star. Mr. Freeman is the son of Emmy Award-winning conductor Maestro Paul Freeman, the first African-American to lead a Canadian symphony orchestra. Let us welcome Douglas Perry Freeman to the Follow Brand Podcast, where we are building a 5-star brand that you can follow. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Follow Brand Podcast. I'm going to go a different route today. Normally, you never know where I'm at. I could be in Florida. I could be in the UK. I could be in California. But, I got a real love for the Big Apple. I don't know what it is. There's something about it. They tell me it's the bread. They tell me it's the people. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's Douglas Freeman. Doug Freeman. If you don't know Doug, you're going to know Doug today. Doug is doing big things in the Big Apple with his company. Now tell me, Doug, I'm going to bring you up right now. I want you to tell us about the company you're working for, the passion that you have, and what's important for you. So Doug Freeman, take it away.
Thank you so much, Grant. And it's a pleasure to be here today. As you mentioned, I'm Douglas Freeman. I am the president of UniWorld Group's Global Reflections and Inclusive Leadership Practice. And that's the global diversity, equity, inclusion practice for UniWorld Group. And as you mentioned, UniWorld Group is a great organization with great founders and backgrounds and tradition. It was founded 54 years ago, as of July, by a phenomenal person, the great Byron Lewis, in 1969. And Mr. Lewis had a vision, of engaging multicultural consumers in ways that traditional brands had not in the past. So Mr. Lewis went about building what's now the oldest, and we think the biggest multicultural marketing and DEI firm, not just in the US, but globally. And he went about that great vision and created a tremendous organization. And then in 2012, he found an extraordinary successor, and her name is Monique Nelson. And Monique is the CEO and chair and the majority owner of UWG of UniWorld Group. And that was in 2012. And the firm has just had an extraordinary run of growth and excitement, and lots of great people participate. In 2018, I had been running a boutique diversity, equity, inclusion practice, and I'd also just completed a stint as a chief diversity officer for a billion-dollar health plan on the West Coast, and known Monique. And she had this vision of inside out, outside in for diversity, equity, inclusion. And so we launched the practice in 2018 with some wonderful work, and did some more great work in 2019. And of course, in 2020, drama hit, and the murder and really execution of George Floyd took place. And that was a wake-up call for many of our clients, some of whom had been sitting on the fence, and they got off the fence very quickly, and they engaged us, and we had to do some dramatic work with all employees, but in some cases specifically with our Black employees who were in tremendous pain and wanted to see movement immediately. And we think with our clients, I think in some regards, we're lucky because they have a great Black-led organization that was able to come in. In many cases, I spoke on a panel with Virgil Abloh, rest in peace, a great designer, over 3,000 Black leaders.
Nice.
Right. And so and not with pie in the sky, with here are the beginnings, here are the short-term wins we're going to get, here are the middle term and the long term. And we're going to come back to you on a consistent basis and deliver.
I love what you're telling me, the backdrop and the story. Now, is your company also part of WPP?
Yes, it's an excellent question. So Mr. Lewis, at the time, prior to Monique, sold a minority stake. So he has a whole company, and a portion of that company is owned by WPP. But this is a majority Black-owned and woman-owned and run firm. So it is a diverse supplier, which is great, but it still has a connective tissue to this very large advertising holding company. For those who don't know, WPP is the largest advertising holding company in the world, about 400 agencies, 200,000 people, including affiliates, offices in, I think it's 160 countries. And the way I heard the depth and breadth of WPP is about 37 minutes of anything advertising is from a WPP company. On 37 minutes of an hour's worth of advertising messaging is from a WPP
that
company.
there is impressive. I mean, a lot of people probably see the content, they see a lot of things that WPP has their stamp on, and not realizing who's behind that.
Yes.
But I'm interested in what's behind Douglas Freeman and his story and how you got into this space. I mean, you've been doing some things around. You've got some transformative tools out there. You're doing things with DE&I. You're doing things in the sports arena. Let's hear more about what you're doing.
Sure. Background-wise, my parents are a native daughter and a native son of the South, but they're musicians by trade, and they're classical musicians by trade. So my father is from Richmond, Virginia. He's one of 12. And when he was 13, he replaced his band teacher and conducted the band. And at that point, he decided he wanted to be a conductor, but he wanted to do it for a symphony orchestra. And in the 50s and 60s, that's not the most usual pathways, but he did find a great music school. He and my mom met, and they both went to the University of Rochester's Eastman School of Music. And they trained as classical musicians. My dad had to go overseas because there wasn't really a conducting academy. So he went to the spot where they have that, which was in Berlin, Germany. So my mom and dad studied for a couple of years at the Hochschule für Musik, shored up their craft. And dad came back, completed his PhD. Then he went to the San Francisco Conservatory, where he ran that for a few years. Probably his most notable accomplishment is that he was the first person to conduct a young fellow by the name of Yo-Yo Ma. And Yo-Yo is one of America's and the world's great classical cellists.
Oh my God.
On the site. And then
all these history you didn't even know. And here it is.
There's a lot of history. Yeah, you can never tell with Southerners. My mother is from Birmingham, Alabama. Her father was an Episcopal priest, and so she was the organist. Also, same year, by 12 years old, she was the organist for her dad's church, my grandfather's church, and that's how she went the piano track. And she was a classically trained pianist. When she came back to the U.S., she went back into teaching, so she was a French and music teacher. And my dad got his first break in Dallas, Texas in the late 60s. His old professor was the chief conductor of the Dallas Symphony, and he became an assistant there. And that's where I was born. So I'm a real Texan.
You are a Dallas Cowboy fan, though? No?
Not, absolutely not. Giants, and you're going to see why the other team, Seahawks.
All right. Let's hear it.
So after Dallas, we moved immediately when I was 1 year old to Detroit, where he was at a better gig as a higher level assistant conductor of the Detroit Symphony. And then his first break was in the Pacific Northwest near Vancouver and Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, when I was 9. So we moved to Victoria, so I was a U.S. expat, kind of like a Army or Navy brat. But I went to school there from 9 to 18. And of course, the team in the Northwest is the Seattle Seahawks. So I was a Jim Zorn, Steve Largent. I saw the Boz, all sorts of characters in the Seattle world. And of course, big fan of Beast Mode, because I ultimately went to the same school. I went to Cal, I went to UC Berkeley for my undergraduate work, and then moved out to New York. Oh, I'm going to date myself, but I'll say it. I arrived in 1995.
Okay.
And have not left the area. I've been in New York, first New Jersey for 7 years, and then in New York for the rest of the time. So that's the story. I'll stop there because that's a lot of story.
Well, you've given me a nice background, and great man, kudos to your parents.
Yes.
You know, going into that and going into music, in the classical music, taking that track, you know, going into other countries, going all the way. And I love Seattle. Seattle, I got good people out there. Love Seattle. Great, great place. And then you end up in the Big Apple. Now I want to understand, how did you begin your track? Now, would you say you are a media advertising person? Are you more public relations? Are you more into the DE&I space? Are you more entrepreneurial? Give us that.
That's great. So I've been a management consultant of some sorts for 20 plus years. When I came to New York, I started out I'm really dating myself, at a place called 9X, which is the New York telephone.
I'm familiar with it.
2 companies before Verizon. That's how dated. I worked in the government relations. It was a great time to be there because it was telecom reform. Yeah. So I was there the summer where all of the current telecommunications framework and the lay of the land was built in 1995. And I was an intern. And I was an intern at the local, state, and federal level. So I had multiple bosses. And I saw a lot of people come through. I saw former Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown walk along with Governor Pataki, Rudy Giuliani, Mike Oxley from Ohio, I think now Senator Oxley. I saw, just lots and lots of folks, because at the time, the CEO, Ivan Seidenberg, was trying to shape a new vision for a little company. And it would be the politicians that would dictate and engage what the new vision would be. And of course, this little 9X is now, one of the biggest, and it worked very well for 9X. It's been interesting to watch transformation. Now, I didn't stay. One of my lobbyist bosses was kind enough to introduce me to one of his friends at an investment bank. So I went to Chase Securities, which now is JP Morgan Chase, and I was there financial analyst. Then I went to grad school at the Kennedy School of Government, got a master in public policy, and came back to New York, worked at Deloitte Consulting as a senior strategy consultant. And then the internet days popped up, and a friend of mine from graduate school was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. And I remember him calling me in the dead of summers, July of 98, I think it was. No, maybe 98, 99. 99, July of 99. And it was blazing hot, and I was coming from a telecom client in the middle of New Jersey. And my friend said, yeah, I'm coming to New York. Oh, what are you doing? I'm opening a New York office. Oh, really? Why? Because I just raised $12 million. I almost drove off the New Jersey Turnpike. And I stopped. This was not a time where I had face or anything. It was just a regular phone.
Yeah.
I said, just a second, man. Okay. Just tell me what you're saying. They said, yeah, actually, 2 of my colleagues are going to interview for roles in the New York office. Would you be interested? And I was like, oh no, I'm having a wonderful time here. And then a day later, I'm like, what time would those interviews be?
Right.
So about a week later, I interviewed with this burgeoning company, Mondis, and it was a business-to-business portal, basically what Staples Online and Upwork combined would be. Now,
this is the e-commerce time.
E-commerce, way back. And so I got that job. I was the head of business development for North America. I was 28, 29 years old, with people about the same age and a CEO who was younger. So we had all this capital and just scruffiness, and we wanted to build an organization, and we just, made all the mistakes that every startup made, but it was still one of the best year stints in business because it was a gold rush. People would, at a trade show, attempt to buy you on the spot. In meetings, large corporations would ask for, we won't do a deal unless we get 25% of your organization. That's not
Instant
going to happen.
Shark
And we
Tank,
say
right?
that's
Just
not
put
going to
you right
happen.
in the
No,
pool.
right there. So that was the craziness of that time. And there, the scrappy, even though his employer is a scrappy startup. And then March 2000 hit and the market crumbled. And we were lucky because we'd raised all our capital in Europe. And there was about a 6-month lag time. So Europe was still frothy from March till September. And we raised another $150 million from a group called Pagine, the Italian Yellow Pages. And it was unheard of. It was the third largest private equity raise in the history of Europe. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the year, the company sold the original because they didn't hit revenue marks. So they had to turn over, they being the founders, turned over their equity to the Italians and they retired. And the rest of us are still working.
I see. So now seeing this, varied background, but you making your mark now in the diversity, equity, and inclusion world. So have you made some pivots along the way?
Very major. So when a company sells, like it did, you either have to move. So they had positions in Europe. And at the time, I was just married in 2000. I just gotten married in May. And my wife's in advertising and we couldn't move at the time. It wasn't. So I took, a small package. And there was one organization that I came across that I felt maybe I could get either a job or a small consulting engagement. I really liked the person I met. So I went out to Visa USA on like a limb and a prayer. I got a 30-minute meeting with a lady who was the highest ranking African-American. She was a VP.
This episode is brought to you by 5-Star BDM. 5-Star BDM is a professional consulting and advisory group keenly focused on business development services for small to mid-sized businesses and entrepreneurs. Although every business is unique, they often share challenges that can be addressed through smart branding. Services include process improvement in operations, digital strategy and transformation, business intelligence, digital marketing, and personal branding. Our 5-Star business and personal branding company has helped a number of professionals and organizations to optimize and grow. The result is more business, more opportunities, better reach, positive outcomes. Please visit www.5starbdm.com to learn more and view all the episodes of Follow the Brand.
And a wonderful person, Linda McGee. I don't mind saying her name. She's just an extraordinary human being. And that half-an-hour meeting was like about 5 or 6 hours of conversation. And at the end, she said, I have a contract for it. I said, oh, that's great. And that was 4 years of just a wonderful work. I was a consultant to Linda. And that's where, first it was in eCommerce because I had this great background that few had, and Visa was considering investing in an e-commerce portal. And I wrote about a 60-70-page analysis that highly recommended they didn't proceed. And it was the right move for them. And I got kudos for that. And then I got another contract and then more. Around 2002, I was asked by my client, hey, did you know anything about diversity and inclusion?
Really? 2002? Wow.
Yeah. And I said, I went through a course at Chase Securities, and they told us how much trouble we get and if we did certain things. She said, no, this is different. This is for firstly at the federal government level. And so Visa had an important project there, what they call procurement card provider to the U.S. federal government. And you have to make sure that you're in compliance. The net was we needed to be more aggressive growing the base of diverse suppliers. And so this great leader with me and others supporting her built something called the Visa Supplier Enrollment Program. And we grew the base of government suppliers, and we did outreach programs and Salesforce training. And in 2004, in the full rollout, we added, I think, over 3,000 diverse suppliers to the government. And we drove over $73 million in new revenues. So I went, that's a lot of money.
Impressive.
But I was not the best negotiator because while I got my consulting fees, I didn't get any back-end pieces. Any good entrepreneur knows you want to get. So I wondered, is this a fluke, or is there something to this visa? Is there the opportunity to leverage diversity for valuable returns, whether it's cost savings, productivity gains, or revenues? And so I built a model called Diversity ROI based on this visa, and I called the visa case study a case study of missed business opportunities, but a special subset, missed diversity business opportunities. And because they had that diversity touch, they're blind spots. People can't see them.
Yes.
Right. So I presented this in early 2005 to a conference called Linkage, and that was one of the largest diversity conferences in America, in Atlanta. And people were like, this is amazing. Gave me cards and glazed over. We have no idea what the guy, we have no idea what he's talking about. Sounds good. So I had to find somebody else who could run with me. And I found another great executive, and I don't mind saying this person, named Michelle Chow Tai, who's at HSBC in New York. And they were looking for ways to leverage diversity to show business impact. And I had that model. So I worked with HSBC and a host of phenomenal activities from 2005 to 2008. We built an entire Black high net worth team that came out of my work. We had built events with partners like Louis Vuitton and David Yurman. And I launched something called the World Diversity Leadership Summit in Prague at the time, because my dad was the conductor of the Czech National Symphony. And we leveraged that. And we took 80 people in Christmas of 2004, right before Christmas, and built the beginnings of diversity best practice dialogues on a global scale. We did that again in 2006. And then in 2007 and 2008, we came to the UN for our first US version. And we had a corporate roundtable. And we had the CEOs of Aviva, which is a big UK insurance, HSBC USA, the president of one of Procter & Gamble's wings, DECO, which is one of the world's largest staffing services, a great guy who's passed away, Terry Lanning, MGM, who was not only an innovator, but one of the truly great, I call just an ambassador CEO with all the great vision that you could ever ask for. And then a fellow by the name of Bud Selig, at the time was the commissioner of Major League Baseball. Yeah, they all sat at the UN convening about diversity and inclusion. And it was picked up. It was on the front page of the business section of the USA Today. And CNN radio broadcast all the CEO Summit live with over 1 million people listening. My mom actually saw a news flash up in Canada, Global Diversity Conference Awards, Bud Selig, I think it was, Innovator, whatever it was.
Impressive.
So those were
I am so impressed.
Interesting times.
Oh, man. I mean, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion now like it's almost new. And it's been around for a long time. It sounds like you were in that supplier diversity world. And then
correct
you started to expand. Yes. You're talking early, the 2000s to 2010. Yes. And people understand, affirmative action, all those kind of things, they've been around, yes, but not as much awareness as now and today. But it seems like you have been, especially in New York, you were in that world that you can actually make some change. and I love the fact that you took initiative and created a program.
Yes.
So you had a platform already. You just needed to implement it.
That's exactly right. And it took me all over the world. We had leaders from Hong Kong to Brazil we had members of the House of Lords in the UK participate in the conference. And that created connections to do work globally. I did work for the Mayor of London's Diversity Works for London program, which was leading up to the 2012 Olympic Games, which is a vision to make the workplace and supply chain inclusive for the Olympic Games. I did work in Brussels, and for people, in the US, there's not as much description of what a Brussels is. It's quite an amazing, and it's the heart of the Brexit issue. But at the time, it was an amazing experiment. It was putting, 22, and I guess at the height, 27 countries together in a currency, legislative, and workforce union and trade of goods and service union, even though all the countries were unique. Now, we had North American free trade, but imagine if the US, Canada, and Mexico had created another layer of government in a small town, let's say Guadalajara, Mexico, and that layer of government had super legislation. That means the legislation from Guadalajara would need to be followed by the Mexican government, US, and Canadian. That wouldn't work in a million years for 3 countries.
Right.
So now place that experiment for 20 plus. And despite Brexit, the UK is out, but to a degree, it's not fully out, but the experiment still continues today, which is extraordinary.
Very much so.
Across that layer. And you have to unify language. Typically, English is the first layer language. And then you'd have other languages, French, German. So when you go to Brussels, they have a parliament. So I've been on the parliamentary floor of the European Union in Brussels. And I've presented to the Secretary of Labor, and I did work for the Secretary of Labor on his equalities, which is their diversity package. And this person had the largest, arguably, diversity budget in the world, about 67 billion euros. So when you're talking to someone like that, you are having impact in 100 cities real time.
Right.
So it was an extraordinary experience. Spent a lot of time in Paris with over 100 French companies and the French Society of Diversity Managers. So the European, the most odd one, but unique, was I received an award from a women's activist nonprofit. And I received it on the floor of the Hungarian parliament. And I did a keynote to 400 Hungarian parliamentarians on global diversity. So this journey back then, it was just an extraordinary round. I'd spoken in the UK at the parliament there, in the ethnic minority committees, and best practice models to engage ethnic minorities. So there are a whole host of things that conference opened up for me personally on a global scale that I couldn't imagine and dream of. And that was, an extraordinary, I'd say, first phase. The diversity phases for me were phase 1 from that 2002 to about 2010, when the recession hit, and the recession changed a lot. We had a very fast growth firm, and ultimately we couldn't do any more conferences because the sponsorships support wasn't there. And so things changed. My organization restructured. About 80% of the folks had to go, and we had to flex to a contractor model to survive. But we did survive, and then we regrew the firm and brought in new partners. And I did that till 2017. And in 2017, I just felt burnt out. I'd been doing this work for a long time, and I felt change in the marketplace required me to do something different. So that's when I went inside to a healthcare plan on the West Coast in the LA area, and they needed a chief diversity officer, and I took that role. and took it very seriously and did a lot of impact quickly, but realized it was very small. For the organizations I work with, they only had about 200 people, and I really needed to be back impacting scaled organizations. And that's when I connected with Monique Nelson.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is good. And I know I've got a lot of questions. I know that others has a lot of questions, because you have been in this space for a while. And as you see the landscape, specifically in the United States, as it relates to diversity, equity, inclusion, as it relates to supplier diversity, it seems like there hasn't been a lot of change. And what is your take on that? Do you feel it's just been held back? Is just not awareness, or what is the formula for success in the United States?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's for many years, it's not myself, it's my colleagues at UniWorld. We've built our own model, and we call it the 3 A's. A as an apple. And this is the way that diversity inclusion we feel has to proceed to be effective. The first A is a combo. It's both to acknowledge the challenge of DEI and to assess it. An assessment is, where do you stand today? And it's based on data. It's based on focus group data, engagement survey data. It's interviews. It's based on demographics, right? It's based on a lot of data. And we fortunately have some great PhD statisticians who can cull it down to 3 or 4 major impact points, so that we can tell an organization that's big, and big being 6,000, 50,000, 100,000, here are the things you have to do right now, which is the second A, actions. So people go into actions first, and that will undermine any diversity, because those actions hadn't been prioritized. So it's just opinion as to what to do. And when things don't work, the whole house of cards. When you have data-driven assessments, you move to prioritize action. This is what we spend our time, energy, and effort on to move the needle and to prove that we've moved them. And then we move to the medium term, and then we move to the long term. And when we talk about actions in large corporations or almost anywhere where people are overworked, actions have to be bite-sized. Do one thing well, even over the course of 3 months. That will add up. Everybody does one thing well in diversity over 3 months, and you have 6,000 people. That's 6,000 great actions, right? They add up, and they lead to success and momentum and change and transformation. Because we describe at UniWorld the need, and you talk about breakdowns. Yeah. The average DEI leader only lasts 1.8 years.
Yeah.
When we lay out our plans, it's 5-year plans, because you can't transform an organization through DEI in 2 years. You can't do much of anything in an organization in 2 years. Right. So if you can imagine that leaders are always, and there are 2 big reasons they go. One, because they see the writing on the wall and there's no commitment, or 2, they just get a better offer somewhere else. Now you've left that gap and vacuum, and the whole, once again, host cards fails, and you're in a reset and the like. And we have many organizations where they're in their 2nd and 3rd iteration. We have a great case study of a group that we started with right after Floyd, but they brought in a great Black male operator, background in business. We immersed them and knowledge transferred him, because he's a great leader, but he needed all this DEA knowledge. We built him and immersed him in it so he could function his first 12 months. We served as his team to support him. He completed his 5-year plan in 22 months.
Nice.
And he's just been promoted to the head of learning and development, which is not the usual. But he's been so successful, he's deemed somebody that can transform. So they give him another opportunity, right? So the reason I lay that out is from a formula of DEI success. And the third A, by the way, is accountability. So the hardest. Metrics accountability, but accountability of, is your DEI initiative sustainable and integrated in the organization? And you can tell that piece right now, Grant, because we're about to hit, there are a few things we're about to. Number one, a tough midterm.
Yeah.
And the tone of the country changing really fundamentally against DEI. Second, a recession at some point. Maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe the following, but it will happen, most likely. And third, restructuring in many organizations. So the uplift, and I call it the great, I am personally thankful to George Floyd for the opportunity, but that's going to go away. It's going to go back to a tougher environment, the environments that I'd seen before. And so in this new next world, you're going to have to follow those 3 A's, and you're going to have to be integrated, and you're going to have business value. The diversity ROI model that I talked about will have to be integrated into to support the strength of the diversity initiative. And if it's not there, people are going to be very surprised at the depth of cuts that will occur. I can say for a couple of our clients that are restructuring, our organization has been extended, which would never happen, but it's because of the value and the push towards integration, the vision and the C-suite buy-in, that many C-suite leaders view this as a have to have for the first time.
Thank you.
Not a nice to have.
Thank you. I'm glad you said that statement right there, that this is no longer a want, but a need.
A need.
Yeah.
The challenge, a good chunk will revert back to needs. Some will be in have to. And I view, as a DEI leader that has people following models of sustainability, my job is to scale out that knowledge and get those who don't see the need and shift that mindset to a have to have. This is a necessity, but with all the fundamentals of business and the logic of diversity supporting that movement.
I tell you, one thing I've noticed lately, I'm gonna revert back to media and advertising, and WPP and what they're doing, and the fact that I have seen of late, let's say since 2020, a lot more people of color being involved in the content that I consume. I'm starting to see, oh, wow, I open up just a random magazine, or I start looking online and looking at, a PDF of a certain company, and I'm starting to see women, minorities, African-Americans, Latino, others than just the Caucasian persuasion that you used to see like 80% of the time. So that tells me someone is trying to be more intentional. Is WPP buying into what Doug Freeman is doing as well?
I am very happy to say I believe the answer is yes, and I have proof points. One is, and I know I haven't asked the people, but she's an extraordinary leader. Her name is Dr. Stacey Graham. She's an African-American female who studied in Germany, and she is leading the Race Equity Project for WPP, which is a $30 million 3-year program. And these are real, tangible ways in which nonprofits and WPP agencies in some way, shape, or form move the needle. And I'll give an example of move the needle globally. WPP supported the launch of a Black civil rights organization in the UK, the first of its kind, basically the NAACP of the UK. Now that's real movement, right?
That's news.
That's news, right? We don't know this, but this is real, supported by multiple organizations, government. That is an extraordinarily impactful movement in that marketplace and environment. Now, not everything that support is of that important scale, but that's the serious intent of the work that's being done. And Dr. Graham is such a brilliant leader that she is able to maximize every penny that she has to really, really grow diversity and inclusion in ways that perhaps hasn't happened. So that's a real example. From my perspective, I've had the opportunity to build the global inclusive leadership learning program. We call it Inclusive Leadership LX, learning experience for leaders around the globe, China and India, UK, US. I've been involved in all steps of that process. We have a brilliant set of leaders. We did great data analysis in all markets. We custom built. We had for our Chinese leaders, Chinese facilitators facilitating diversity work in Mandarin.
Nice.
All right.
Awesome.
So this is the seriousness that this organization, no, by no stretch of the imagination should we say WPP or any corporation is anywhere near where they should be. And I don't think they would claim to do so, but you can give credit where there is intent and you can see at least some impact. And I think that's a big difference.
Yes.
From the what I call smoke and mirrors models, where people just wanted to get on diversity lists or brand the heck out of talent and never hire them. This is important work that you're starting to see once get bite-sized impact.
I tell you, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
I'm going to let you go. But the question that I have is that I want you to talk directly to that DE&I leader who has hit that wall, meaning from a commitment from the organization that brought them in, but has not really taken the baton forward. They don't give them the tools to succeed. I hear it so often. So many people like, yes, I'm here and I do not want to be the diversity hire. I am here to transform culture and to give you ideas and tools to do that. Talk directly to that individual who feels that frustration, but trying to move the needle forward.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk macro and then to that leader individual. And I had an opportunity to be at a great conference, Diversity Woman Conference, and another shout out to Dr. Sheila Robinson, who was a pioneer and visionary. And it was one of the first big DEI conferences that's been face-to-face. I was in Chicago last week, so I have a little bit of new, I think, fresh information on it. One of the things, Grant, that sticks out to me is that, in a labor shortage world, you're going to have labor shortages in DEI as well. So as the intensity of George Floyd's impact on organizations happened, there was a very major push to hire DEI executives, just an explosion of DEI roles. The harsh realities are there were, at the time, and even now, one could argue, nowhere near the number of people required externally to fill those roles. So what you're left with is a choice you have to develop from within. And I would guess, without knowing the data, probably 2 out of every 3 roles is a within fill, because that's just, there are a lot of advantages of fulfilling those roles. People often, they know the organization. They have credibility. They're very smart leaders. They're respected. Oftentimes they're high potentials. So they're best in class individuals. The problem is that the task and the monumental nature of the challenge is so great that so many people are in a 2-track world. They've got to deliver now and learn now. And there really isn't a certification, and there's great places like Cornell and that will give you the academic knowledge, which is necessary, of course, but it won't give you the knowledge to do something right this second and to make key decisions without fear of negative repercussions. So a lot of folks probably 2 out of 3 people are in this track of they're reinventing the wheel, Grant.
Yeah.
Right. Our organization, and there are probably others, have hundreds of years of DEI experience. So what we're trying to do is figure out strategic ways to engage those leaders. And I ultimately think what we will try to do going into 2023 for the betterment, it's really, believe it or not, we're actually better served doing these large clients one-off. I got to be honest. But for the betterment of the space, we need to do what we call a consortium model. And we did this years ago for global diversity expansion. We took major companies back in 2008 who wanted to expand globally but didn't have budgets, and we put them together in a group for about 6-7 months, and we developed together. And it was a big knowledge share. And I think that's probably something we and others who have depth of diversity knowledge, we're going to have to create a consortium. We're going to have to put 20, 30 of these very talented people and develop them over 6 to 12 months in a knowledge share model and in a risk-averse model. Because when you have the reason that the example I gave of the fellow who's brilliant, did a 5-year plan in 22 months, and he'll tell you this, he didn't have any risk. Our firm de-risked him entirely, right? We knew it. We've done this. I've done, I don't know, 200 plus engagements myself, right? So we've done this so many times. You're not going to have a problem. You're just not, right? Especially as you're a smart leader, which many of these people are. So organizations like ours and others, I believe, to ensure the strength of those great talented leaders who have come up inside, we'll have to create some kind of consortium, DEI executive immersion program that's real life, real time, deals with the real issues, and can help them. They need it typically, when I think about star leader, minimum 12 months to go through that process and be shored up so they're not reinventing the wheel and that they can be effective on a move forward basis.
And that is wonderful advice. No, I see why you are who you are. You're a super connector in the C-suite world for sure. And this is wonderful, wonderful interview that we've done today. And I want to thank you very much. If anyone wants to get in contact with you, what would be the best way?
I can put it. I don't know if it'll pop up for everyone in the chat function.
No, just go ahead and just tell us, because a lot of people are listening to it through audio.
So Doug, so that's my first name, DOUG, Freeman, FREEMAN, at UWGNY.com. So I'll say it again, Doug.Freeman at UWGNY.com.
Excellent. Thanks for joining the Follow the Brand podcast today, Doug. I want to encourage you, everyone in your network and around the world, to tune in to the Follow Brand podcast at www.5starbdm, and that is B for brand, D for development, and for masters.com. Thank you very much, Doug. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much, Grant. What a pleasure and honor. Thank you to your audience. And let's build success together.
Absolutely. I'm 100% behind you. Let's do it together.
Okay.